Mira didn't know that the man walking toward the stocks was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. She didn't know that he had been searching for her across 3 kingdoms for half his lifetime, and she certainly didn't know that her step-family's cruelest act would become the moment her entire world changed forever. She only knew pain. The iron shackles cut into her wrists where they hung above her head, metal worn smooth by countless other prisoners. The village square reeked of rotting vegetables and worse things the crowd had hurled at her over the past 3 hours. Tomato pulp dripped from her dark hair, mixing with the tears she refused to let fall. "Thief!" someone shouted from the growing mob. A chunk of mouldy bread struck her shoulder. "Worthless little rat!" Mira kept her eyes down, watching the cobblestones blur through her exhaustion. The theft accusation was a lie, of course. Her step-family had planted the silver bracelet in her meagre belongings, then called for the village magistrate with theatrical shock and dismay. She should have expected it. After her father's death 2 months ago, they'd made no secret of wanting her gone permanently. "Look at her," her stepsister Cordelia called out sweetly from somewhere in the crowd. "So proud even now, you'd think she was nobility instead of a servant." Laughter rippled through the square. More rotten fruit followed. Mira's arms had gone numb an hour ago. Her simple brown dress, the only one she owned, hung in tatters from the stones thrown earlier. The October wind bit through the torn fabric, raising goosebumps along her exposed skin. She tried to shift her weight to ease the burning in her shoulders, but the stocks held her immobile. The magistrate had sentenced her to 6 hours of public humiliation before banishment. 4 more hours to endure before they would finally unlock the wooden contraption and cast her out with nothing but the clothes on her back, if she survived that long. "Should have hanged her outright," muttered the blacksmith's wife. "Thieves deserve worse than stocks." "At least she'll be gone by sunset," replied another voice. "Good riddance to bad blood." Bad blood. The words hit deeper than the thrown vegetables. Her step-family had whispered them often enough, that her mother had been worthless, a nobody who'd somehow tricked a good man into marriage, that Mira carried the same tainted heritage. Maybe they were right. The crowd's jeering grew louder as someone new approached. Mira didn't look up. She'd learned that eye contact only encouraged them to throw harder, aim better. But something shifted in the atmosphere around the square. The shouting faltered, then faded entirely. Boots appeared in her limited field of vision. Expensive leather, she noticed through her haze of pain, spotless despite the muddy cobblestones. Not the rough work boots of villagers or merchants, but something finer, richer. The silence stretched until it felt unnatural. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Enough. The single word carried absolute authority, spoken in a voice like dark honey and steel. Mira's breath caught despite herself. She'd never heard a voice quite like it, dangerous and gentle at the same time, commanding without cruelty. The lock on the stocks shattered. Mira gasped as the wooden restraints fell away, her arms dropping to her sides like broken things. She would have collapsed if not for the strong hands that caught her, steadying her with impossible gentleness. "Easy," the voice murmured, closer now. "I've got you." She looked up for the first time in hours and forgot how to breathe. The man kneeling beside her was beautiful in a way that seemed almost otherworldly. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, despite a face that couldn't be past 30. Eyes the colour of storm clouds, intense and piercing, yet filled with something that made her chest tighten strangely. A face carved by shadows and starlight, all sharp angles and compelling lines. But it was his touch that undid her completely. The moment his fingers brushed her wrist, warmth shot up her arm like liquid gold. Not the heat of fever or fire, but something deeper, something that seemed to reach into the hollow spaces in her chest and fill them with light. She gasped at the sensation, and his eyes darkened. "Mine," he whispered, so quietly she thought she might have imagined it. "Who—" Mira tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a croak. Her throat was raw from thirst and holding back sobs. He removed his cloak, fine black wool lined with silver, and wrapped it carefully around her shoulders. The fabric smelled like pine forests and winter nights, like safety she'd never known existed. "My name is Kane," he said, helping her to her feet with infinite patience, "and no one will ever hurt you again." The crowd had backed away, as if pushed by an invisible force. Mira noticed they wouldn't meet the stranger's eyes, their earlier boldness replaced by what looked like terror. Even Cordelia had gone pale, pressing herself against the baker's stall. "Please," Mira whispered, swaying despite his steadying grip. "I didn't steal anything. I swear to you, I never—" "I know." His thumb traced across the angry red marks the shackles had left on her wrists, and that impossible warmth pulsed again. This was never about theft, was it? She stared at him, shocked by his understanding. "How did you—" "Because I know what cruelty looks like." His voice turned to winter frost as he looked toward where her step-family huddled together. "And I know what innocence looks like too." Kane turned back to her, and his expression softened completely. "When did you last eat?" Mira's mind struggled to focus. Between the pain, exhaustion, and strange sensations his presence caused, thinking felt impossible. "This morning. Yesterday morning." Something dangerous flickered in those storm-grey eyes. "They starved you." It wasn't a question, and the way he said it, like he was cataloguing crimes for punishment, made her shiver despite the warmth of his cloak. "It doesn't matter," she said quickly, not wanting to cause more trouble. Her step-family could make her life infinitely worse if this stranger left, and they still had power over her. "I'll be gone soon anyway. They're banishing me at sunset." "No." Kane's voice carried that absolute authority again. "They're not." He looked out over the crowd, and every person in the square took an involuntary step backward. When he spoke, his words rang off the stone buildings with commanding finality. "This woman is under my protection now. Anyone who wishes to dispute that is welcome to take it up with me personally." No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Kane's attention returned to Mira, and his expression gentled once more. "Come," he said, offering her his arm. "Let's get you somewhere safe." Safe! The word sent another pulse of that golden warmth through her chest. When had she last felt safe? When had anyone ever offered her protection without expecting something in return? "I don't understand," she whispered, not moving. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Kane's smile was small but devastating, transforming his sharp features into something that stole her breath entirely. "Don't I?" Before she could ask what he meant, he was leading her gently away from the stocks, from the silent crowd, from the only life she'd ever known. Mira looked back once to see her step-family watching with expressions of fury and fear. Cordelia's mouth hung open in shock, while her stepmother clutched the magistrate's arm as if he could somehow undo what had just happened. But no one followed. No one even called out. As they walked, Mira became aware of details that her pain-fogged mind had missed before. This man, Kane, moved like a predator. Fluid, controlled, every step deliberate. The expensive clothes she'd noticed weren't just fine, they were exquisite. The cloak around her shoulders was lined with actual silver thread, worth more than she'd seen in her lifetime. More than that, people were staring. Not just at her dishevelled appearance, but at him, with the same fearful respect she'd seen in the square. Shop owners bowed their heads as they passed. A group of well-dressed merchants actually stepped into the street rather than block his path. "Who are you?" she asked again, though part of her wondered if she really wanted to know the answer. Kane glanced down at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time." The golden warmth in her chest pulsed stronger, and Mira found herself believing him, despite every instinct that screamed it was impossible. This had to be a dream. Men like this didn't rescue girls like her. They didn't appear in village squares like avenging angels and shatter iron locks with their bare hands. but the warmth of his cloak was real. The strength of his arm beneath her palm was real, and the way he looked at her, like she was something precious instead of worthless, felt more real than anything else in her small, hard life. Whatever this was, whoever he was, Mira found herself hoping desperately that she wouldn't wake up. The inn Cain brought her to wasn't like any place Mira had ever seen. Where the village taverns were dark and smoky with low ceilings and rough wooden floors, this establishment gleamed with polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Even in her pain-fogged state, she couldn't miss the way every servant they passed stopped what they were doing to bow deeply to Cain. "Your Majesty," the innkeeper breathed, practically falling over himself as they entered. "We weren't expecting, that is, we would have prepared." "The blue room," Cain said simply, his arm still steady around Mira's waist as she swayed on her feet. "And send up a bath, food, and the healer, immediately, Your Majesty." The words echoed in Mira's spinning head as Cain guided her up a grand staircase lined with portraits of stern-looking nobles. She tried to process what she'd heard, but exhaustion and hunger made thinking feel like moving through thick honey. The blue room turned out to be larger than her entire family's cottage had been. Rich sapphire curtains framed tall windows that looked out over rolling hills she'd never seen before. A fire crackled in an ornate hearth, and the bed, gods, the bed was enormous, draped in silk the colour of midnight. "Sit," Cain said gently, guiding her to a chair by the fire. "The healer will be here soon." Mira sank into the cushions, Cain's cloak still wrapped around her shoulders. The warmth from the fire felt almost foreign after hours in the cold square. "This is too much," she whispered, looking around the opulent room. "I can't. I shouldn't be here." "Where should you be?" Cain asked, settling into the chair across from her. His voice held genuine curiosity, no judgment. "I don't know." The admission came out smaller than she intended. "Nowhere, I suppose. They were going to banish me. I have nowhere to go." Cain was quiet for a moment, studying her with those storm-grey eyes. "Tell me about the theft accusation." Mira's hands twisted in the fabric of his cloak. "My step-family planted a silver bracelet in my things. They claimed I stole it from Cordelia's jewellery box." She looked up at him, needing him to believe her. "I swear to you I never took anything. I've never stolen anything in my life." "I know," Cain said simply. "How can you know? You don't even know me." Something flickered across his expression, too quick for her to interpret. "I know enough." Before she could ask what he meant, a soft knock interrupted them. Cain called permission to enter, and a stream of servants appeared carrying steaming buckets of water, trays of food that made Mira's stomach clench with hunger, and medical supplies. The healer was a kind-faced woman with gentle hands who cleaned and bandaged the worst of the cuts on Mira's arms and wrists, while Cain stood by the window, giving them privacy but never leaving the room entirely. Mira found herself stealing glances at him as the woman worked. He stood like a soldier, she noticed, or like someone accustomed to command. His clothes, now that she could see them properly in good light, were clearly worth more than her father had earned in years. "Your Majesty." The innkeeper's words kept echoing in her mind. "Better," the healer pronounced finally, packing away her supplies. "The cuts will heal cleanly if kept dry. She needs food and rest more than anything." Cain nodded his thanks, and the woman gathered her things with another deep bow before departing with the other servants. They were alone again. "You should eat," Cain said, gesturing toward the tray they'd left on a small table. Even from across the room, Mira could smell roasted meat and fresh bread that made her mouth water. She didn't move. "I heard what the innkeeper called you." Cain went very still. "Did you?" "Your Majesty." Mira's voice came out barely above a whisper. "That's what he said. Your Majesty." Silence stretched between them. Cain turned from the window to face her fully, and for the first time since he'd freed her from the stocks, he looked uncertain. "Does it matter?" he asked finally. "Does it?" Mira stared at him in disbelief. "Of course it matters. If you're—" if you're actually—" She couldn't bring herself to say the words. "A king," Kane supplied quietly. "Would that change anything?" "Everything." The word burst out of her before she could stop it. "Don't you see? I'm nobody. I'm the daughter of a village blacksmith and a woman they say was worthless. I've been sleeping in a storage room and mending clothes for scraps. And if you're really—" "I'm the man who couldn't stand to watch you suffer," Kane interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "That's all that matters here." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, bringing their eyes level. Up close, she could see flecks of silver in the grey of his irises, could smell the scent of pine and winter that seemed to cling to his skin. "Mira," he said, and she realised she'd never told him her name. "I don't care about bloodlines or titles or what anyone else thinks you are. I care about what I see when I look at you." "What do you see?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, vulnerable and desperate. Kane's hand came up to cup her cheek, and that golden warmth flooded through her again, stronger this time. "I see someone brave enough to endure hours of cruelty without breaking. Someone who worries about causing trouble for others even when she's the one who's been wronged. Someone who—" He paused, something intense flickering in his expression. "Someone I've been waiting for." The warmth in her chest pulsed, and Mira felt something shift inside her, like a door opening that she hadn't known was there. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "You don't have to. Not yet." Kane's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, incredibly gentle. "All you have to understand is that you're safe now. No one will hurt you again." "You keep saying that, but you don't know my step-family. They'll find a way to—" "No." The word carried absolute finality. "They won't." There was something in his tone that made her believe him completely, even though logic said it was impossible. Village blacksmiths' daughters didn't get rescued by kings. They certainly didn't get promised protection from men who could shatter iron with their bare hands. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for me?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, his hand still cradling her face. When he spoke, his voice was so soft she had to strain to hear it. "Because the moment I saw you, something in my chest recognized you, like coming home after being lost for years." He searched her eyes. "Don't you feel it? The warmth, the pull, like there's a golden thread connecting us." Mira's breath caught. She did feel it, had felt it from the moment he touched her in the square, but admitting that felt like stepping off a cliff into empty air. "That's impossible," she whispered. Kane's smile was small and devastating. "Impossible things happen more often than you might think." A knock at the door interrupted them again. Kane's hand dropped from her face as he called permission to enter. A young man in fine clothes stepped inside and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "forgive the interruption, but urgent messages have arrived from the capital." Kane's jaw tightened slightly. "Can they wait?" "I'm afraid not, sire. The matter requires your immediate attention." Mira watched this exchange with growing understanding. The formal address, the urgent messages from a capital, the way everyone treated him with such deference. It was all real. Kane really was a king, and she was a village blacksmith's daughter who'd been accused of theft and locked in stocks like a common criminal. "Go," she said quietly, the weight of reality settling on her shoulders like a cold shroud. "You have responsibilities. I understand." Kane turned back to her, and something in her expression must have given away her thoughts, because his eyes darkened. "Mira, really, it's all right." She tried to smile, though it felt brittle on her lips. "You've already done more than anyone would expect. The room, the healer, the food. It's more kindness than I've known in years." "This isn't kindness," Kane said firmly. He looked at his messenger. "Tell them I'll review the messages within the hour, not before." The young man bowed again and withdrew, closing the door behind him. "You think this changes things," Kane said, turning back to her. It wasn't a question. "Doesn't it?" Mira pulled his cloak tighter around herself, as if it could ward off the growing chill in her chest. "You're a king. I'm nobody." "Stop saying that!" Kane's voice sharpened. You are not nobody." "Look at me," Mira said, gesturing to her torn dress, her bandaged wrists, the evidence of her public humiliation. "Really look at me. I was locked in stocks for theft. My own family wanted me gone. I have nothing. I am nothing." Kane moved faster than she could follow, kneeling in front of her again and taking her hands in his. The golden warmth blazed between them, so strong it made her gasp. "You are everything," he said fiercely, "and I don't care what anyone else sees when they look at you. I don't care about titles or bloodlines or what your step-family thinks. What I see is a woman worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth—" He stopped abruptly, as if he'd been about to say something too revealing. "Worth what?" Mira whispered. Kane's grip on her hands tightened. "Worth everything I have to give." The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. This was moving too fast, feeling too much like something from the fairy tales her mother used to tell her. Kings didn't fall for village girls. They didn't promise protection and speak of golden threads and look at serving wenches like they hung the moon. But the warmth where he touched her was real. The way her heart raced when he looked at her was real. And the feeling that she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment, for him, was more real than anything else she'd ever experienced. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, voice barely audible. "I don't know how to be around someone like you." "Then we'll figure it out together," Kane said simply, "one day at a time." The knock at the door came again, more insistent this time. Kane's expression tightened with frustration, but he released her hands and stood. "I have to deal with this," he said reluctantly, "but I'll be back. Will you eat something while I'm gone, please?" Mira nodded, not trusting her voice. Kane studied her for another moment, as if memorizing her face, then crossed to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "Mira, that golden thread you feel, it's real, and it's not going anywhere." He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Mira sat in the sudden silence, Kane's cloak warm around her shoulders and the scent of pine and winter filling her senses. She looked around the opulent room, at the fire crackling cheerfully in the hearth, at the tray of food that smelled like heaven. Then she touched her chest, where that strange warmth still pulsed steadily, like a second heartbeat. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, her world had changed forever in the space of a few hours. She'd gone from having nothing and nowhere to go to sitting in a king's room with promises of protection and safety she'd never dared dream of. It should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 days passed in a blur of impossibilities. Mira found herself settling into a routine she'd never dared imagine. Mornings brought breakfast on fine china, served by servants who treated her with careful respect despite her obvious lack of breeding. Afternoons meant quiet conversations with Kane when his royal duties allowed, walks through the inn's private gardens, and moments of connection that left her breathless and confused in equal measure. She was helping arrange flowers in the blue room when Kane returned from his latest meeting with advisers, his expression more troubled than she'd yet seen it. The golden warmth that always sparked between them pulsed stronger as he entered, as if responding to his emotional state. "Bad news from the capital?" she asked, setting down a spray of autumn roses. Kane paused in loosening his formal jacket, surprised by her perception. "How did you—" "You get a line right here when you're worried," Mira said, touching her own forehead between her eyebrows. "I've been watching you for 3 days." Something shifted in Kane's expression at her admission. "You've been watching me?" Heat flooded Mira's cheeks. "I didn't mean, that is, I wasn't—" "I've been watching you too," Kane said quietly, crossing to stand near her by the window. "The way you hum while you arrange flowers, how you always save the last bite of bread for the birds outside your window, the fact that you've read the same book 3 times because you're afraid to ask for another." Mira's breath caught. She hadn't realized he'd noticed such small things. "You don't have to keep track of my habits." "I want to." Kane's voice dropped to that warm, intimate tone that made her pulse race. "I want to know everything about you, Mira, What makes you smile, what makes you afraid, what you dream about when you think no one's watching. The intensity in his storm-grey eyes should have frightened her. Instead, it made something in her chest flutter wildly, like a caged bird suddenly remembering it had wings. "That's dangerous thinking for a king," she said, trying to keep her voice light despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. "Is it?" Kane stepped closer, and she could smell that scent of pine and winter nights that seemed to cling to his skin. What if the king has finally found something worth the danger? Before she could respond, Kane's hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across the spot where a bruise from the stocks was finally fading. The golden warmth flared between them, stronger than ever, and Mira's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. "Tell me what you're thinking," Kane murmured. "That this feels like a dream," she whispered honestly. "That I'm going to wake up back in that storage room with my step-family screaming at me to get back to work." Kane's other hand found her waist, steadying her as her knees went weak. "And if this isn't a dream—" Mira opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Then I'm terrified of what it means." "What do you think it means?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities Mira didn't dare name. But looking into Kane's eyes, feeling the pull of that invisible golden thread that seemed to bind them together, she found herself speaking a truth she'd been afraid to acknowledge. "I think it means you're going to break my heart," she said quietly. "Because men like you don't really want girls like me, not forever, not when reality sets in." Kane's hands tightened on her, and something fierce flashed in his expression. "What would it take to convince you that's not true?" "I don't know," Mira admitted. "I've never had anything good that lasted." Before Kane could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. This time, the door opened without waiting for permission, and a man in elaborate court dress strode in with barely contained urgency. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but—" He stopped short when he saw how close Kane and Mira were standing, his eyes widening as he took in Kane's hands on her face and waist. Kane didn't step away from her, didn't drop his hands or put distance between them. If anything, he moved slightly closer, as if shielding her with his body. "Lord Aldrich," Kane said evenly, "I believe I made it clear that I was not to be disturbed." "Yes, sire, but urgent news has arrived." Lord Aldrich's gaze kept flicking to Mira with barely concealed disapproval. "Perhaps we could speak privately." "Speak freely," Kane said, his tone carrying a warning edge. "Miss Mira is under my protection." The formal introduction hit Mira like a physical blow. Miss Mira. Not lady, not even the courtesy title due to a merchant's daughter. Just Miss, marking her clearly as common-born in front of this noble who was already looking at her like something distasteful he'd found on his shoe. "Your Majesty," Lord Aldrich said carefully, "word has reached your enemies that you've taken a companion. Lady Ravencrest people are spreading rumours through the southern territories." Kane went very still. "What kind of rumours?" "That the Northern King has been bewitched by a village witch, that she used dark magic to entrap you for political gain." Lord Aldrich's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "They're saying she seduced you to weaken the kingdom's defences." Mira felt all the blood drain from her face. Lady Ravencrest, she knew that name. Everyone in the Borderlands knew it. The woman who'd been Kane's intended bride before their betrothal had been mysteriously broken off 2 years ago. The woman who commanded the loyalty of half the southern lords and had never forgiven the slight. "That's ridiculous," Kane said flatly. "Of course, sire, but the rumours are spreading quickly, and there are other concerns." Lord Aldrich glanced meaningfully at Mira again. "Your council is growing restless about your extended absence from the capital. They feel your attention has been diverted." Kane's jaw clenched. "My attention is exactly where it needs to be." "With respect, Your Majesty, you have responsibilities. The trade negotiations with the Eastern Kingdoms, the border disputes that require your immediate attention, the matter of securing alliances through—" Lord Aldrich's voice trailed off delicately. Through marriage, Cain finished, his voice dangerously quiet. The kingdom needs stability, sire, a strong alliance, a queen who can bring political advantage and— Get out! Cain's voice cut like a blade. Your Majesty, out, now! Lord Aldrich bowed hastily and retreated, leaving them alone in a silence thick with unspoken implications. Mira stepped back from Cain's touch, wrapping her arms around herself. He's right, isn't he? You do have responsibilities, a kingdom to run, alliances to maintain, a proper marriage to make. Mira, I'm just a village blacksmith's daughter who was accused of theft 3 days ago, she continued, her voice gaining strength even as her heart shattered. Lady Ravencrest is right. What else could this be except some kind of enchantment? What else would explain a king throwing away his duties for someone like me? Cain moved toward her, but she stepped back again, shaking her head. Don't, she whispered. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. You think I care about any of that? Cain's voice was rough with emotion. You think titles and alliances matter more to me than— Than what? Mira challenged. What am I to you really, Cain? A distraction? A momentary fascination? Something to amuse yourself with until duty calls you back to reality? The words hung in the air between them like poisoned arrows. Cain stared at her for a long moment, something raw and painful flashing across his features. Is that really what you think? He asked quietly. I don't know what to think, Mira said honestly. I don't understand any of this. 3 days ago I had nothing, and now I'm standing in a king's chamber being accused of witchcraft by his former betrothed. How is any of this supposed to make sense? Cain was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I was 14 when I first shifted into my wolf form, he said unexpectedly. My father told me that someday I would know my mate by scent, by the way my wolf responded to her presence. He said it would be unmistakable, like recognizing a missing piece of my own soul. Mira's breath caught, but she didn't speak. I'm 32 now, Cain continued. I've met hundreds of eligible women, been betrothed twice for political reasons, attended more balls and courtship rituals than I can count, and not once, not ever, has my wolf stirred for any of them. He stepped closer, and this time Mira didn't retreat. Until 3 days ago, Cain said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, when I walked into that square and caught your scent for the first time, when I looked at you and felt something inside me roar mine so loudly I'm amazed the entire village didn't hear it. The golden warmth in Mira's chest flared so strongly she gasped. Cain, you want to know what you are to me? Cain's hands found her face again, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. You're my mate, Mira. You're the other half of my soul that I've been searching for my entire life without even knowing I was looking. The words hit her like a physical blow. Mate. She'd heard the term before. Everyone had heard the old stories about werewolf bonds, about the supernatural connection that tied certain pairs together for life. But those were legends, fairy tales, things that happened to other people in distant lands. That's impossible, she whispered. Why? Because you're not noble-born? Because you don't have a title or political connections? Cain's thumb traced across her cheekbone. The mating bond doesn't care about bloodlines, Mira. It cares about souls recognizing each other. But I'm not. I can't shift. I'm just human. Are you? Cain asked quietly. Have you ever tried? The question sent a shock through her system. She thought about the strange warmth that sparked between them, about dreams she'd had since childhood of running through forests on 4 legs, about the way her instincts seemed to sharpen whenever Cain was near. I don't know, she admitted. Then we'll figure it out together, Cain said, echoing his words from 3 days ago. But Mira, I need you to understand, this isn't some temporary fascination or political inconvenience. This is forever. You are forever. The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, stole her breath. But even as her heart soared at his words, reality crashed back down around her. Forever doesn't matter if your kingdom falls apart, she said quietly. If Lady Ravencrest starts a war because you chose me over duty. If your people suffer because their king was thinking with his heart instead of his crown." Kane's expression grew fierce. "My people will be stronger with you beside me, not weaker. A true mate makes an alpha more powerful, not less. And if they don't see it that way, then they'll learn." Kane's voice carried absolute certainty. "But I won't choose duty over you, Mira, not when I've finally found what I've been searching for my whole life." Before she could respond, another knock echoed through the room. This time Kane growled. Actually growled, the sound inhuman and possessive. "What?" he snapped. A young servant's voice came through the door, trembling with nervousness. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there are riders approaching under a flag of truce. Lady Ravencrest herself, sire. She requests immediate audience." Kane and Mira stared at each other in the sudden silence. The golden thread between them pulsed with shared apprehension. "She's coming here," Mira whispered. "Let her come," Kane said grimly. "It's time this was settled once and for all." But even as he spoke with such confidence, Mira could see the worry lines forming on his forehead, the tension in his shoulders. Whatever Lady Ravencrest wanted, whatever game she was playing, it was about to reach them both. And Mira had the sinking feeling that when it did, the fragile happiness she'd found in these 3 days would be the first casualty. Lady Ravencrest arrived like a storm given human form. Mira watched from the Blue Room's window as the elegant black carriage rolled into the inn's courtyard, followed by a retinue of guards in midnight blue livery. Even from a distance, the woman who emerged commanded attention. Tall, regal, with silver blonde hair that caught the afternoon light, and a bearing that spoke of absolute confidence in her own power. "She's beautiful," Mira said quietly, her heart sinking as she took in the lady's flawless features and expensive gown that probably cost more than Mira's father had earned in his lifetime. Kane moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders with reassuring warmth. "Beautiful isn't the word I'd use." "What word would you use?" "Dangerous." Kane's voice carried grim certainty. "Evelyn Ravencrest has never forgiven a slight in her life, and she considers our broken betrothal the greatest insult she's ever endured." A chill ran down Mira's spine. "Maybe I should leave, if she's here because of me." "No." Kane's hands tightened on her shoulders. "You stay right here. We face this together." Before Mira could argue, urgent footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, followed by a sharp knock. "Your Majesty!" came Lord Aldrich's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. "Lady Ravencrest insists on immediate audience. She's not alone." Kane's jaw clenched. "What do you mean?" "She's brought Lord Garrison from the Eastern Territories and Lord Blackmore from the Western Border, along with representatives from the Merchants' Guild." Lord Aldrich's voice dropped. "Sire, this isn't just a social call. This is a formal challenge to your authority." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mira felt all the colour drain from her face as the implications hit her. A formal challenge meant Lady Ravencrest wasn't just spreading rumours. She was actively working to undermine Kane's rule. "Because of me," Mira whispered. Kane turned her in his arms, his storm-grey eyes fierce with protectiveness. "Because she's a power-hungry woman who can't stand being refused. This was always coming, Mira. You're just the excuse she's chosen to use." Another knock, more insistent this time. "Your Majesty, they're demanding entrance to the inn. Lady Ravencrest claims the right of noble audience." Kane closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with resigned determination. "Tell them we'll meet in the main hall in 10 minutes. "Kane, no," Mira said desperately. "You don't understand. If they see me with you, if they know they'll use it against you. They'll say I bewitched you, corrupted you." "Let them try." Kane's voice carried absolute authority. "I'm done hiding what you mean to me." "But your kingdom will be stronger with you as my queen, not weaker without you." Kane cupped her face in his hands, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Do you trust me?" The question was simple, but Mira knew her answer would change everything. Looking into Kane's eyes, feeling the golden warmth of their bond pulsing steadily in her chest, she found her voice. "Yes," she whispered, "I trust you." Kane's smile was devastating and fierce. "Then let's go remind Lady Ravencrest exactly who she's dealing with." The main hall of the inn had been hastily arranged to accommodate what felt more like a tribunal than a social call. Lady Ravencrest sat in the position of honour, her silver blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style that showcased a sapphire necklace worth more than most people's houses. The lords flanking her looked grim and disapproving, while the merchant representatives seemed nervous about being caught in political manoeuvring above their station. Mira felt every eye in the room fix on her as she entered at Kane's side. She'd changed into the finest dress the innkeeper's wife could provide, simple blue wool that was clean and well made, but clearly marked her as common-born among this gathering of nobles. "Your Majesty," Lady Ravencrest said, rising with fluid grace. Her voice was cultured honey with an edge of steel. "How rustic you look. Country life suits you." Lady Ravencrest. Kane's tone was perfectly polite and completely cold. "What brings you so far from your usual haunts?" "Concern for the kingdom, naturally." Lady Ravencrest's pale blue eyes flicked to Mira with barely concealed disdain. "Word has reached us of your extended holiday. Your council grows worried." "My council serves at my pleasure," Kane said evenly, "as do all my subjects." "Of course, but surely you understand their concern when their king abandons his duties to dally with—" Lady Ravencrest paused deliberately, letting her gaze travel over Mira's simple dress and work-roughened hands. "Common entertainments." The insult hit like a physical slap. Mira felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but before she could respond, Kane stepped slightly forward, putting himself between her and Lady Ravencrest's contemptuous stare. "Careful, Evelyn," Kane said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "You're speaking about my intended queen." The silence that followed was deafening. Lord Garrison choked on his wine, while Lord Blackmore's face went purple with shock. Even Lady Ravencrest's composure cracked for just a moment before sliding back into place. "Your queen?" Lady Ravencrest's laugh was like breaking glass. "Kane, surely you're not serious. This little village mouse, she can barely curtsy properly, much less rule a kingdom." "She won't need to curtsy to anyone except me," Kane replied smoothly, "and she'll rule at my side with more grace and wisdom than half the noble-born ladies I've had the misfortune to meet." Mira's heart soared and shattered at the same time. Kane was defending her publicly, claiming her before witnesses who could spread word across multiple kingdoms. But she could also see the political catastrophe unfolding around them like a wildfire. "This is madness," Lord Blackmore sputtered. "Your Majesty, think of the alliances, the trade agreements, the border treaties that depend on your marriage to—" "To whom?" Kane's voice turned arctic. "I don't recall being aware of any binding agreements regarding my choice of wife." Lady Ravencrest stood slowly, her movements predatory and calculated. "Perhaps not binding in law, but certainly expected by your people, your nobles, your allies." She gestured to the other lords. "We represent significant territories, Kane, territories that expect their loyalty to be appreciated." The threat was politely veiled but unmistakable. Support Lady Ravencrest's vision for the kingdom, or face rebellion from major regions. "Are you threatening me, Evelyn?" Kane asked, his tone conversational, but his posture shifting subtly into something more dangerous. "I'm offering guidance," Lady Ravencrest replied. "Your little pet here is charming, I'm sure, perhaps suitable for a discreet arrangement. But Queen? Kane, be reasonable. She has no breeding, no connections, no political value whatsoever. She's a liability." "She's my mate." The words rang through the hall like a bell. Several people gasped, and Mira felt her knees go weak at the public declaration. Kane had just announced their supernatural bond before witnesses, something that carried immense significance in their world. Lady Ravencrest's face went white with fury. "Your mate? This common little nobody is your destined mate? How convenient that your wolf recognises someone so utterly beneath your station." "Watch your tongue," Kane warned, his voice beginning to carry the rumbling undertone that meant his wolf was close to the surface. "Or what?" Lady Ravencrest snapped, her own composure finally cracking. "You'll abandon your kingdom for her? Throw away centuries of bloodline and breeding for a village girl who was locked in stocks 3 days ago for theft?" The words hit Mira like physical blows. Theft. Of course Lady Ravencrest knew about the humiliation, the public degradation that had brought Kane to her in the first place. Of course she would use it as a weapon. "I didn't steal anything," Mira said quietly, finding her voice at last. "Oh, my dear child," Lady Ravencrest's smile was sharp as a blade. "We all know that. The theft was arranged, of course. Your step-family was quite cooperative once properly motivated." Mira's blood went cold. "What? Did you think it was coincidence?" Lady Ravencrest laughed, the sound cruel and mocking. "I needed the Northern King discredited, and what better way than to have him fall for a supposed criminal, a woman whose own family cast her out as worthless." "You orchestrated it," Kane said, his voice deadly quiet. "You arranged her humiliation." "I arranged an opportunity," Lady Ravencrest corrected smoothly. "Though I must admit, I expected you to tire of her quickly once the novelty wore off. I didn't anticipate this level of infatuation." Mira felt the room spinning around her. Everything, the theft accusation, the stocks, the public humiliation, had been arranged by this woman as part of some larger political game. She'd been a pawn without even knowing it. "Why?" Mira whispered. Lady Ravencrest studied her with cold calculation. "Because weak kings make for unstable kingdoms, and a man who abandons duty for sentiment is weak." Her gaze shifted to Kane. "Choose, your Majesty, your crown or your pet, your kingdom or your foolish infatuation, but you cannot have both." The challenge hung in the air like a sword. Kane looked around the room, taking in the faces of the lords, the merchant representatives, the political reality of what Lady Ravencrest was forcing him to confront. Then he looked at Mira, and something shifted in his expression, something fierce and final and absolutely certain. "I choose her," Kane said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I choose my mate, my queen, my other half, and if you or anyone else has a problem with that choice, you're welcome to challenge me for the crown directly." The golden warmth in Mira's chest exploded into something that felt like pure light. Kane had chosen her. Publicly, definitively, irrevocably. He'd chosen her over politics, over duty, over the easy path that would preserve his alliances. Lady Ravencrest's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, Kane, when your kingdom burns because you chose passion over politics, when your people suffer because their king was thinking with his cock instead of his crown. You'll remember this moment." "The only thing I'll remember," Kane said, moving to put his arm around Mira's waist, "is the day I stopped pretending anyone else's opinion mattered more than my mate's happiness." He looked around the room one final time, his storm-grey eyes challenging anyone to speak against him. When no one did, he nodded once. "This audience is over. Anyone who wishes to continue serving the Northern Kingdom is welcome to stay and discuss terms. Anyone who doesn't is free to find the door." As the nobles and merchants began to murmur among themselves, some looking thoughtful and others openly hostile, Kane turned to Mira with an expression so tender it stole her breath. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Mira looked into his eyes, feeling the golden thread of their bond stronger than ever, and smiled. "None," she whispered. "Not a single one." But even as happiness flooded through her, she couldn't shake the feeling that Lady Ravencrest's threats weren't empty ones. The woman's parting look had promised retribution, and Mira knew instinctively that this confrontation was only the beginning. Kane had chosen her. Now they would both have to live with the consequences. The aftermath of Lady Ravencrest's departure left the inn in tense silence. Some of the nobles had chosen to stay, pledging continued loyalty to Kane despite their obvious reservations about his choice. Others had swept out in Lady Ravencrest's wake, their allegiance clearly shifted. But none of that mattered to Mira as Kane led her back to the blue room, his hand warm and steady in hers. What mattered was the way he'd stood before them all and chosen her. Publicly, irrevocably. "You realise what you've just done," she said quietly as he closed the door behind them. Kane turned to face her, his storm-grey eyes intense but calm. "I've claimed my mate before witnesses. It's the most natural thing in the world." "Natural for you, maybe." Mira's laugh was shaky. "I'm still trying to process the fact that Lady Ravencrest orchestrated everything. The theft, the humiliation, even bringing us together. It was all part of her plan to discredit you." Kane's expression darkened. "She miscalculated. She thought I would tire of you, that the bond wouldn't be real." He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. "She was wrong about everything." The golden warmth flared between them at his touch, stronger than it had ever been. Mira gasped at the intensity of it, feeling something shift inside her chest like a door opening. "Kane," she whispered, "something's happening. The bond, it feels different." His eyes widened slightly. "Your wolf, she's responding to the public claiming." Kane's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Close your eyes, Mira. Listen to what your instincts are telling you." Mira let her eyes flutter shut, focusing on the warmth spreading through her body. For a moment there was only the familiar golden glow. Then something else stirred, something wild and fierce and utterly right. She could smell Kane's scent more clearly, could hear his heartbeat like a drum in her ears. When she opened her eyes again, the world looked sharper, more vivid. "My eyes," she whispered, catching her reflection in the window glass. Her normal brown irises now held flecks of amber gold. "They're changing." Kane's smile was fierce with satisfaction. "There she is. Your wolf was always there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. But I'm not noble-born. My family has no shifter blood." "Bloodlines aren't everything," Kane said softly. "Sometimes the wolf chooses its own path." His hands moved to frame her face. "You were meant to be mine, Mira, meant to be my queen. Every instinct I have is screaming it." Before she could respond, Kane's mouth found hers in a kiss that was nothing like the gentle touches they'd shared before. This was claiming, possession, the full force of their mating bond, finally allowed to flow freely between them. Mira melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as heat raced through her veins. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Mine," Kane murmured against her lips, the word carrying the weight of supernatural law. "Yours," Mira agreed, the response coming from somewhere deeper than thought. The golden thread between them pulsed once, blindingly bright, and suddenly Mira could feel Kane's emotions as clearly as her own. His fierce protectiveness, his overwhelming relief at finally having her accept the bond, his absolute certainty that they were meant to be together forever. "The mating bond," she whispered in amazement. "I can feel what you feel." "And I can feel you," Kane said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your fear that this is too good to be true. Your amazement that someone actually chose you. Your love." He stopped, his expression going tender. "You love me." It wasn't a question, but Mira answered anyway. "Yes, I love you. Against all logic, against every self-preservation instinct I have, I love you." Kane's kiss this time was soft, reverent, full of promises. "I love you too, more than my crown, more than my kingdom, more than my own life." A knock at the door interrupted them, but this time Kane didn't pull away. "What?" he called out, his arms still wrapped around Mira. "Your Majesty," came Lord Aldrich's voice, "the remaining lords request a private audience. They wish to discuss accommodations for the transition." Kane looked down at Mira questioningly. She took a deep breath, feeling the new confidence that came with their fully bonded state. "Go," she said. "They're your allies now. You need to secure their loyalty." "What about you?" Mira smiled, feeling her wolf stir with newfound strength. "I'll be here when you're done. We have forever, remember?" Kane's answering smile was devastating. "Forever," he agreed, sealing it with another kiss before reluctantly letting her go. Alone in the blue room, Mira moved to the window and looked out at the courtyard where Lady Ravencrest's carriage had stood just hours ago. The political battle was far from over. She could feel it in her bones. But something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the terrified village girl who'd been locked in stocks. She was Kane's mate, his chosen queen, with a wolf of her own stirring to life inside her. When Kane returned an hour later, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "The remaining lords will support us," he said, crossing to take her hands. "They want assurances about trade agreements and border security, but they're willing to acknowledge you as queen." "And the ones who left with Lady Ravencrest?" Kane's jaw tightened. "That's a problem for another day. Tonight I want to focus on us." He paused, studying her face. "How are you feeling, really?" Mira considered the question seriously. "Different, stronger, like I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be." She squeezed his hands. "Ready?" "Ready for what?" "To be your queen, your mate, your partner in whatever comes next." Mira's smile was fierce with newfound determination. "Lady Ravencrest wants a fight. She can have one, but she's not taking you away from me, and she's not making you choose between duty and love ever again." Kane stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. "There's my queen," he said, pulling her into his arms, "fierce and brave and absolutely perfect." "Not perfect," Mira corrected, "but yours, completely and forever yours." As the sun set outside the blue room's windows, Kane held his mate close and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 32 years. He'd found her, claimed her, made her his in every way that mattered. The political battles ahead would be challenging, but they would face them together, as mates, as partners, as king and queen. "Tomorrow we leave for the capital," Kane murmured into her hair. "It's time to introduce my queen to her people." Mira lifted her head to meet his eyes, amber gold flecks glowing in the firelight. "Will they accept me?" "They'll learn to," Kane said with absolute certainty. "And if they don't, they'll answer to both of us." The golden thread of their bond pulsed with shared determination and love. Whatever came next, they would face it together, united, unbreakable. The village girl who'd had nothing had found everything. The king who'd searched his whole life had finally come home. And in a room lit by firelight and filled with the scent of pine and winter nights, two souls recognized each other completely and chose forever. 2 months later, Mira stood on the balcony of the northern palace, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, and marvelled at how completely her world had transformed. The journey from the inn to the capital had been a whirlwind of preparation, presentations to the court, and careful political manoeuvring. Not everyone had welcomed their future queen with open arms. Some nobles still whispered about her common birth and the circumstances of their meeting. But Kane's unwavering support and her own growing confidence had won over enough allies to secure her position. More than that, her wolf had continued to strengthen. The timid village girl who'd cowered in stocks was gone, replaced by a woman who could hold her own in court politics and had earned the respect of Kane's inner circle through her intelligence and genuine care for the kingdom's people. "Good morning, my queen," Kane's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and the contentment that had become their daily reality. Mira smiled without turning, feeling his arms slide around her waist as he pulled her back against his chest. Even after 2 months of marriage, the simple pleasure of his touch still sent warmth flooding through her veins. "I love watching the sunrise from here," she said, leaning into his embrace. "It makes everything feel possible." "Everything is possible," Kane murmured against her hair. "We've proven that." It was true. Lady Ravencrest had made good on her threats, attempting to rally opposition to Kane's rule through whispers of enchantment and political weakness. But her rebellion had crumbled when faced with Kane and Mira's united front. A queen who could shift into a rare silver wolf who spoke for the common people while commanding noble respect had proven far more politically valuable than anyone had anticipated. "The morning reports?" Mira asked, settling more comfortably in Kane's arms. "Trade agreements with the Eastern Kingdoms are finalised, the border disputes have been resolved peacefully, and the harvest reports from the outer provinces are the best we've seen in years." Kane's smile was evident in his voice. "Your idea to send aid during the spring planting season paid off beautifully." Mira felt a flutter of pride at his words. In the early weeks of her transition to Queen, she'd suggested using the royal treasury to provide seeds and tools to struggling farming communities. The court had been sceptical, but the investment had strengthened loyalty throughout the realm while improving food production. What about Lady Ravencrest? "Evelyn has withdrawn to her family's ancestral lands and hasn't been heard from in weeks," Kane said dismissively. "Her supporters have either sworn new allegiance to us or found themselves politically irrelevant. She's no longer a threat." A soft knock interrupted them. Kane sighed against Mira's hair, but didn't release his hold on her. "Yes?" "Your Majesties," came the familiar voice of Kane's personal secretary. "Forgive the interruption. The morning council meeting has been moved to accommodate the arrival of the delegation from the Southern Islands." "We'll be there shortly," Mira called back, then turned in Kane's arms to face him. "Duty calls, my king." Kane's storm-grey eyes were soft with the love that still took her breath away. "In a moment. First I have something for you." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Mira's heart skip. "Kane, you've already given me everything. The crown, the ring, this life." "Not everything," he said quietly, opening the box to reveal a delicate pendant shaped like two wolves, their forms intertwined. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the silver work so detailed she could see individual fur markings. But it was the small inscription that made tears spring to her eyes. "Two souls, one heart." "It's beautiful," she whispered as he fastened the chain around her neck. "But Kane—" "There's something else." Kane's voice dropped to the intimate tone that always made her pulse race. "The court physicians confirmed what we suspected. You're pregnant, Mira." The world seemed to stop. Mira's hand flew to her still flat stomach, wonder and joy flooding through her in equal measure. "Are you certain?" Kane's smile was radiant. "Very certain we're going to have a baby." Mira threw her arms around his neck, laughing through happy tears as he spun her around on the balcony. When he set her down, she cupped his face in her hands, marvelling at the love and contentment she saw there. "A heir," she said softly. "The kingdom will be so pleased." "I would be pleased even if it weren't about heirs," Kane said seriously. "The thought of a child who's part of both of us, part of our bond. Mira, I can't think of anything more perfect." As if summoned by their joy, the golden thread of their mating bond pulsed with shared happiness. Mira could feel Kane's overwhelming love, his excitement about their growing family, his deep satisfaction with the life they'd built together. "I love you," she said simply, the words carrying all the weight of everything they'd overcome together. "I love you too," Kane replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. They stayed that way for several minutes, wrapped in each other's arms on the palace balcony, watching the sun climb higher over the mountains that marked the borders of their kingdom. It was a perfect moment of peace in what had become a life full of joy and purpose. Eventually, duty called them inside to face another day of ruling together. But as they walked hand in hand toward the council chamber, Mira reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. 2 months ago, she'd been a village blacksmith's daughter with nothing to her name but shame and fear. Now she was a queen, a mate, a mother-to-be, and the co-ruler of a thriving kingdom. She had a place where she belonged, people who valued her, and a love that grew stronger every day. The stocks where she'd been publicly humiliated felt like something from another lifetime. The girl who'd believed herself worthless was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own value and wasn't afraid to claim it. As they entered the council chamber, where advisers waited with respectful bows and genuine smiles, Kane squeezed her hand once in quiet support. They took their seats at the head of the table, 2 thrones placed side by side, equal in every way, and began the work of ruling their kingdom together. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, painting everything in golden light. Outside, the capital city was coming alive with the sounds of a prosperous, peaceful realm. Citizens went about their daily lives secure in the knowledge that their king and queen ruled with wisdom and compassion. It was, Mira thought, as Kane's hand found hers under the council table, exactly the life she'd never dared dream of. A life where she was loved, valued, and home. The village girl who'd had nothing had found everything that mattered, and every day forward stretched ahead of them like a promise of continued happiness, shared purpose, and a love that would last forever. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts on these stories. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales of love and transformation.